first look in core plays for DraftKings DFS contest. What we do in this video every week is we go position by position, talking about some of my core plays, or what I at least anticipate to be my core plays going into this weekend. Obviously, it's a little bit early on in the week, but we at least know what some of these game scripts are going to look like, and we can at least take some educated guesses on some injury situations as well. So in general, these are going to be plays that have relatively high floor projections, and of course, that have high ceilings for GPP contests. Some of them are a little bit safer than others. We'll of course cover that. Some of them are more high upside plays, more for large field tournaments, and of course we'll identify some of those guys as well. So make sure to strap on in, and let's get ready here for the Week 12 main slate. At the quarterback position, we'll start off with Cam Newton at $5,600. This matchup against the Dolphins is a relatively good one. In terms of matchups against the pass, they rank as a bottom 10 passing defense. They're also a team that lets up a relatively high amount of points. On the other side of things, Cam Newton has been an absolute phenom since getting back into that offense. Has been extremely efficient as both a rusher and a passer. Has looked polished with his passing accuracy, which I think a lot of people had doubts about him coming right off the couch per se. But I have him projected right now for 19.6 points, which would actually be a little bit of regression from what we've seen from him. But obviously, you just want to take a little bit more of a cautious approach. But even with that type of a dampering on his projection, still projects as one of my favorite quarterbacks on the slate. So definitely going to be making my player pool. Might not be as attractive of a stacking option just because some of the stacking options on the team kind of lack that top end upside. A lot of what we love about Cam Newton is that he brings that rushing upside to the table, and unfortunately when we're stacking, that can cause a little bit of negative correlation. So I like him as a one-off. I don't think you have to use him in stacks, and again, really like him this week. Next up, we have Jalen Hurts at $7,300 playing against the Giants this week. And believe it or not, this is one of the higher over-under totals on the entire slate, ranking as the third highest game in terms of total points. And if we take a look at the matchup on paper, it's great for passing offenses, at least for the Eagles side versus this Giants team. So I have him projected for 22.2 points. And much like a Cam Newton, he's also somebody I like more as a standalone option rather than as a stack. He brings a lot of rushing upside to the table, averaging over 50 yards rushing per game. He's putting up plenty of rushing touchdowns, also polished as a passer as well. And as the season has gone on, as he has gotten more and more acclimated to this offense, you've seen him improve, and I expect that to continue. As somebody who has a lot of Jalen Hurts memorabilia, after those first few games, I was seriously worried about the kid's future, but he's shown a lot of progress over these last few months, and I definitely expect that to continue. Next up, we have Matthew Stafford, and I guess we can lump together number 4 and number 3 here with Stafford and Aaron Rodgers, obviously playing in the same game here. And if we take a look at the Vegas numbers, not the best target, is ranking as the number 4 over-under game on the slate at just over 46 points. And that's showing a lot of credence behind these defenses. They're giving a lot of credit to them. Obviously, both of them ranking as top 10 defenses to this point of the year, but we're also dealing with two high-caliber quarterbacks. Both of them aren't shy at all about getting into slugfest, into absolute scoring shootouts, and that's what I expect here. I mean, every single week there seems to be that one game that ends up being a shootout that everyone thought would be a low-scoring affair, and I think this is a prime candidate to be so. And at the same time, both of them are also priced adequately. $7,100 for Stafford, $6,900 for Aaron Rodgers. If they were in a higher total game, something closer to 50 or even 51 fantasy points, like we have up there with Tom Brady and the Colts, they would be $75, maybe even $8,000 on this slate. So I like the price savings that you get. And again, I think it's a matchup that could be a sneaky candidate to be a shootout. So 21.9 projected points for Matthew Stafford, a little bit less for Aaron Rodgers there at 21.5. But I love the stacking options for each team, and you'll definitely see that when we get to our wide receivers. I think that they're perhaps the best plays for the entire slate. Let's get to number 2 and number 1, though. Not really dealing with a matchup here, but independently, both of these matchups are great on paper. Joe Burrow going against the Steelers, and it's unfortunate to say, but the Steelers have been terrible against the pass this year. I'm obviously a Steeler fan myself, but the one thing you can definitely say is that teams have absolutely torched them. And some of the offenses that have taken them apart are some of the worst passing offenses in the NFL. So that is a huge red flag, or should I say a green flag for anybody playing against them. You know that you're going to get plenty of yardage, plenty of production through the air. It could be a little bit less this week. We are expecting to get TJ Watt back, also Joe Hayden and Minkah Fitzpatrick. So not going to be quite as much of a dumpster fire as what we saw against that Chargers team, but still expect Burrow to go out and have a good week. Main reason why he finds himself at number 2 is Obviously, in terms of points per dollar, ranking is one of the best plays on the slate, but it also comes down to the stacking options. You can use people like Jamar Chase, who's one of my favorite wide receivers, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, CJ Uzuma. All of the options are relatively cheap on this slate and make for a very good balanced build. You can spend up at running back for somebody like Christian McCaffrey if you want to. So overall, a lot of the other options on here were a little bit expensive, maybe perhaps except Cam Newton. But Joe Burrow, a more balanced option to stack at quarterback, and definitely somebody I like even against my Pittsburgh Steelers. But at number one, the best stacking option on the slate. Unfortunately, also going to probably be the most chalky option. We'll have to see come Sunday morning. We'll obviously talk about that during the live stream. But this matchup against the Colts is ideal. Both of these offenses have been clicking of late. Both defenses have also let up a lot of points of late. Even that Giants offense over there on Monday Night Football scored a lot more points than a lot of people expected. So at $7,600, I definitely like targeting this matchup, and specifically this Tom Brady side of things. Not only do we have very good stacking options on that team, particularly if Antonio Brown sits, that is only going to make that offense more concentrated. There's going to be more usage for people like Mike Evans, same thing with Chris Godwin, perhaps even Rob Gronkowski, who are all decent plays this week as well. A couple of them actually going to be talking about later on in the video. But overall, Tom Brady in a very good spot to pay off that salary tag. And again, obviously expensive. You'd expect that for somebody in such a high over-under game. Also somebody who's been as prolific through the air as Tom Brady has this year. But you're paying for that salary. You're also getting the ownership there, but it's all well warranted. I understand that. If he's getting close to 25% ownership, come Sunday, obviously, you end up being a fade. Nobody's worth that ownership in DFS unless they're at the dead minimum by some mistake. And somebody like a Jalen Hurts or something like that. But that's obviously not the case here. Still love him. But somebody that we are going to have to track the ownership on just in case come Sunday. And next up, we have our running backs. And first off, we'll talk about Saquon Barkley of the Giants. It's a decent matchup with this Philadelphia Eagles defense. Obviously, a good price tag on Barkley as well. He's returning from injury. We haven't quite seen him return to his entire workload to this point, but another 4 days of rest. He also looked relatively good during that Monday Night Football matchup. I do expect Saquon Barkley to come out and get more usage, look a little bit better than what we even saw on Monday Night Football. And at $6,300, he has more than enough firepower to go out and pay off that price tag. So a lot of it comes down to the matchup as well. This Eagles team, while they have a good front seven when it comes to pass rush, have been susceptible to the run to this point of the year, ranking as a bottom 10 defense against the run. So obviously like the matchup there, I like the price. So as a result, definitely going to be in my player pool. Next up, we have Elijah Mitchell, a little bit more of a value option at the running back position. I like this matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. They've let up just a ton of points to opposing offenses in general. Elijah Mitchell is right now questionable with a broken finger, but as of right now, things are definitely siding towards him playing. If he ends up not playing, you could go to Trey Sermon at $4,600. Obviously would be even cheaper, but would absorb pretty much all of that workload. So whoever ends up starting for this 49ers team, I really like a lot. As of right now, I do expect that to be Mitchell, projected for 17.6 points. Good matchup there, high over-under, good game script as well. Definitely think that he's a solid option. Next up, we have Dalvin Cook at $8,100. This matchup against the 49ers, he's obviously on the other side of that game. I just like it in general. Both these offenses have been efficient to this point of the year. They also tend to run a lot of plays, tend to run with a lot of pace. And anytime you have those type of matchups, you want to target them. And unfortunately, on the Vikings side of things, that chalky matchup is going to be Kirk Cousins. He's got a good price tag this week. You have some good stacking options as well. But unfortunately, he's probably going to see 15, even 16% ownership. He's just a slam dunk play. It's not like I think that he's a bad play. In fact, in cash, he's probably the optimal build this week. I just think that in large field tournaments, what I tend to play when it comes to DraftKings DFS, Dalvin Cook is a much more interesting option. Right now, I have him projected for sub 5% ownership, have him projected for 19 fantasy points exactly, and to be honest with you, has true 30-plus point upside. He could go up and have one of those eruption games that we see from a Derrick Henry and I guess a Jonathan Taylor at this point of his career. Dalvin Cook has that same kind of upside, and I think at this point, anytime you get him at sub 5% ownership, he's going to be somebody that you should be considering and definitely makes my player pool. Next up, we have a combination of players. We're not sure if Aaron Jones is going to be suiting up. Obviously, if he is, I think he's a great play here. But if he's not, A.J. Dillon at just $100 cheaper becomes a very easy pivot option. Both of them have a good matchup against this Rams defense. This Rams defense is obviously one of the best teams in the NFL against the pass. But fortunately for opposing teams, against the run, they're a little bit more porous. After they lost Ndamukong Suh, a couple of those guys from the middle of that defense, you haven't been quite as stingy as they were in years past. So again, whoever starts from this matchup, I really like. Not only are they going to see PPR upside, Aaron Jones, we have known to have that upside for quite a few years now. A.J. Dillon, we had our doubts about him, but last week went out, caught 7 balls. So he's shown that same kind of upside. So pretty much whoever ends up starting for this team, I like a lot. And I think that there's going to be some extra PPR upside for whoever starts as well, just because the cornerbacks on this Rams team are elite. They're out there trying to shut down your best target, probably going to be double covering Davante Adams, who is still going to be in my player pool. But if he ends up getting a little bit of extra attention, you know who's going to be wide open? Those running backs. So people that I love targeting this week. And again, whichever one ends up starting, I love going to in DFS. And number 2, we have Najee Harris, though, on the other side of that Bengals game. But just because I like the Bengals offense doesn't mean I hate the Steelers. I definitely think that you can run it back with Najee Harris, somebody who's going to get a ton of touches. He's $8,200, so finally getting the respect that he deserves at that price tag. But at 21.7 projected points, no one else in the NFL is matching this guy's kind of workload. I mean, this guy's getting 25 to 30 touches week in and week out. And to be quite honest with you, he hasn't had that massive game yet. You know, hasn't gone out there, had an 80-yard touchdown, that kind of thing. I mean, opposing defenses are really sitting down against him, but Ben Roethlisberger has started to look really good over these in that last few weeks. It started to be very efficient. He's throwing for quite a bit of yardage. And again, even though they lost that game against the Chargers, you're not going to win when your defense lets up 42 points. So I really like what I'm seeing from that offense, but I think a sneaky beneficiary of that offensive efficiency is Najee Harris. As they start to give more and more attention to those wide receivers, to the passing game, start to give more respect that way, Najee Harris could have some serious holes opened up. So I'm extremely bullish on his prospects going forward, particularly this week, in what should be a relatively high-scoring game between the Steelers and the Bengals. But finally, at number 1, we have Christian McCaffrey, the guy that if you have the salary, definitely go ahead and spend up for him at $9,000. We already talked about the matchup with this Dolphins team. They've been sneakily one of the worst defenses in terms of overall points scored against them. And if we take a look at what ends up playing well against them, it's the rushing game. That's why we end up liking Cam Newton. It's also why we like Christian McCaffrey, who obviously brings both rushing and receiving upside to the table. We don't have to overthink it here. We're not going to take too much time on Christian McCaffrey. He's by far the best fantasy player in the world. He has been for 3 or 4 years now. The only issue with him is his availability. It's whether he's healthy and whatnot. Does not have an injury designation for this week. Got a ton of touches last week, which is extremely, extremely satisfying. You know, it makes us not have to worry about his workload going forward. We know that that's likely to increase towards the beginning of the year, especially in week 1, got over 30 touches. And he's going to return to that kind of workload at some point. They need his production. They are in the thick of a wild card race now. I guess even for the division over there, they could compete with Tampa Bay come the end of the year. And as a result, I do expect him to have some massive games going forward. This guy truly has 35, 40 plus point, maybe median projections at times. I mean, if we're expecting him to get his 9 to 10 catches a game, to get his 20 rushes, that kind of thing, our median projection is going to be right around 29 fantasy points. So obviously, you know, I've taken a little bit more of a cautious approach on McCaffrey, kind of nerfed his numbers back. But if you run just a pure numbers approach on him, that's the kind of projection that you get for him. So really like him here in this instance. Obviously, it's a decent matchup against the Dolphins team. And just because he's $9,000 does not mean I'm avoiding him. He's only $900 more than Dalvin Cook. So don't really have to sacrifice all that much to end up paying up for him. So if it was a one-on-one between the two, we'd definitely prefer McCaffrey. And now we have our wide receivers to target. And quite frankly, a lot of these guys I love using with our quarterbacks. At number 6 is one of those guys, Mike Evans, somebody who I love pairing up with Tom Brady. He's going to cost you $7,200, so definitely not getting a price discount on Mike Evans. But if Antonio Brown ends up sitting, as of right now, citing towards he's likely to be out, has not practiced to this point of the week, Mike Evans is going to still be a great target. Somebody who's going to see a 35 to 40% target share, particularly in the red zone where he sees a spike up to right around 50% usage. We saw that last week, was just absolutely bodying wide receivers, ended up getting that one touchdown that just quite frankly looked a little bit too easy. So I like him here in this matchup against the Colts. We already know it's going to be one of the higher scoring games this weekend. Have him projected for 18.8 points. The unfortunate part about that Brady Evans stack is it's just a little bit too expensive, right? We're going to be able to fit it into our pool, but it kind of squeezes us into some less unique builds, more of into some of the same value plays that a lot of the other people in the field are going to play. So going to have to see how it comes down to it on Sunday in terms of roster construction, in terms of the value plays that we have available. But as of right now, projects as one of my top 6 wide receivers. Next up, we have Brandon Cooks at $5,800. This matchup against the Jets isn't really as good as it looks on paper. A lot of people are giving a lot of crap to this Jets team, but the fact of the matter is, against opposing quarterbacks, they've been a top 5 defense. So Brandon Cooks, I still just like the price tag. He's only $5,800. Obviously, Tyrod Taylor is a massive upgrade to that offense over somebody like Davis Mills. So expect Brandon Cooks, who's already been having a relatively good year, to continue that production and usually most likely improve on that production as we go forward. So like him there at a 17.5 point projection as somebody who I love using in the mid-tier. Next up, another mid-tier option, getting a little bit more expensive though, I'd say, is Deontay Johnson at $6,600. I like him on the other side of that Bengals game. You can use him as a buyback for some of those Bengals stacks. But again, somebody who's going to get a ton of targets. As of right now, has a 33% usage rate in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, is seeing right around 8 to 10 targets per game. And in a high total game like we have between the Steelers and this Bengals game, going to be an absolute gold mine. So like him there in 18.6 points projected, and honestly probably going to be a little bit lower owned than he should be as well. He's not one of those sexy picks that people are running to the window to play every single week, and as a result, when it comes to DFS contests, usually provides quite a bit of value. Next up, we have Jamar Chase of the Bengals on the other side of that game, somebody who we can match up with somebody like Joe Burrow. Because Joe Burrow is a little bit less expensive than some of the other elite tier options on the slate, you're able to get to somebody like a Jamar Chase with ease. So using those stacks isn't an issue. Obviously, the Steelers, we've already outlined that they're atrocious against opposing passing attacks. So Jamar Chase, who's had a quiet few weeks after his huge explosion at the beginning of the year, perhaps might be getting back to some of that production. Was able to get to 15 fantasy points last week, caught a touchdown, but really didn't do a lot of anything else much other than that. I expect him to have a better week this week. I have him projected for 19.1 points. Next up, our last 2 options are by and far the best options at wide receiver, pretty much a whole tier above the rest. First up is Davante Adams at $8,600. This matchup against the Rams isn't ideal. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey is going to be tasked with covering Davante Adams a majority of the time. But the beauty about Davante Adams' game is they can move him around. They can use him on shifts, on jet sweep type motions. They can use him in the slot if they need to, and they can hide him from Jalen Ramsey. So you're going to hear a lot of people in the industry this week talk about the matchup, the fact that Davante Adams, you have to lower his projection and whatnot. The fact of the matter is Jalen Ramsey's a good cornerback. I believe that he's lost a step this year. You can take a look at the metrics, they reflect that. Davante Adams is just by and far the best wide receiver. And the by and far best wide receiver is a lot quicker than the best cornerback in the world. So it doesn't really matter who's covering him. He's going to get separation. And Aaron Rodgers is so good at quarterback, he's going to hit him when he gets that separation. So I am not worried about the matchup. If you were dealing with a rookie quarterback or something like that, and it's number 1 wide receiver, I might be a little bit more worried. But this is Aaron Rodgers we're talking about. This is Davante Adams, who is arguably the best route runner in NFL history. I'm not worried about the matchup. So I like him there at $8,600 and a 22.8 point projection. Next up, though, at number 1, we have Cooper Kupp, who is rewriting the roles at wide receiver. It seems $9,600. I don't remember there being a wide receiver price higher than this, at least from recent memory. This matchup against the Packers also isn't ideal. Probably going to see plenty of coverage from Jair Alexander, but much like a Davante Adams, they can move him across the field. They can hide him in the slot. They can use him on those jet sweeps. They use those same type of plays over there in LA. And as a result, we know he's going to get his keeping here. We know that because Robert Woods is out of the offense, he's going to see even extra usage. And it's not like somebody like Van Jefferson Jr. or Odell Beckham Jr., who's just been inserted into the offense, is going to take away from that. I have Cooper Kupp projected for a 48% target share as of this point, over 16 targets in this game. Actually, I have projected right up for 21 targets in this game, which is ridiculous, but he's truly in line at some point of this year to go out and break the reception record. I believe it's 20, something like that, receptions in a game. he gets the kind of usage in this offense where if Stafford goes out and throws 50 or 60 balls, he could break that kind of record. So I like him there at $9,600, even though he's rewriting the rule book at wide receiver. Well warranted. I mean, this should be a shootout. Again, we've already talked about how I expect this to be a game that could be a shootout and people aren't expecting it to be. And he would be a direct beneficiary of that type of game script. We have Rob Gronkowski kicking off our tight ends. At $4,400, he is drastically underpriced for the slate. Even though his first game back wasn't the greatest, he still got plenty of usage, didn't end up scoring a touchdown or anything like that. He's definitely in line for a much better bounce back week this time around. I've already talked about this Colts matchup being one of the best matchups in the NFL, one of the highest over-under games. And if we take a look at Rob Gronkowski's first 3 or 4 games this year, we see the exact kind of upside he brings to the table. So definitely underpriced here. I don't really care what his ownership comes in at. I'm going to be over the field. One of my favorite plays here on the slate. I expect him to come in right around 10 to 15%. And if that's the case, I'll have 35 to 40% in my pool. Next up, we have Tyler Higbee, who's a little bit more of a flyer play. Definitely more of a diamond in the rough. A little bit more overlooked of a play this week. I like the matchup against the Packers. Obviously, that whole game in general, I expect to be a little bit higher scoring than the public. So at $4,200, he's going to present plenty of value. Without Robert Woods in that offense, part of that usage is obviously not only going to go to just Cooper Kupp, but Van Jefferson Jr., OBJ, also in part to Tyler Higbee. So I expect him to have some good games going forward as somebody who brings plenty of red zone upside to the table as well. Next up, we have Kyle Pitts, who's, again, one of the best tight ends on the slate. We don't have a ton of depth at this position. This matchup against the Jaguars is ideal. They are one of the worst defenses in the NFL, particularly against the pass. And Kyle Pitts gets a ton of usage. You're talking right around 8 to 10 targets per game. He also does quite a bit of damage with those targets as well. It's good after the catch. He's also good at high pointing balls in the red zone. So I like the matchup against the Jaguars. I like the type of upside and opportunity that we expect him to have as well. So at nearly a 16-point projection, that's why he makes this list at number 4. But next up, we have CJ Uzomah, who's a lot cheaper than the other people that we have on this list. Love the stacking option with Joe Burrow. He's somebody who's shown plenty of upside as well. He's a lot more athletic than people give him credit for. A lot of that is just due to his appearance. He kind of looks like a bigger kind of like, guy with a beard, more of like a mound man than he is an NFL player. The fact of the matter is, the guy's a lot faster than he looks. He's also a lot stronger than people expect. He runs people over, gets you plenty of yards after the catch. And in this matchup against the Steelers, who let up a ton of passing yardage, he could definitely eat them alive. And I can also tell you, just from personal experience as a Steeler fan, Devin Bush is absolute dog shit at covering opposing tight ends. So expect CJ Uzomah to go out there, probably score 2 touchdowns. That's just how bad Bush is covering them. Next up, though, on the other side of things, we have Pat Freiermuth at $4,300. He's been the one bright spot for the Steelers offense other than Najee Harris to begin the year. Got a decent price tag there at $4,300. Also a good matchup against this Bengals team. I expect this game to be a lot more competitive than a lot of the industry thinks, also a little bit higher scoring. So as a result, anytime you have these higher totals, the tight ends are going to pop a little bit. The tight ends get a lot more touchdown production than the wide receivers on average. They're also a little bit more dependent on that production. So anytime we get boosts to the over-under, I love the tight ends in those affairs. So that's why you see both of those tight ends on there. Uzomah's a little bit more of a value pick than Freiermuth, but Freiermuth definitely gives you a little bit of a higher floor. But at number 1, our favorite option at tight end is George Kittle. Also made the list last week. At $6,400, I obviously love the matchup against the Vikings. This is going to be one of the higher over-under games on the slate. So at a 16.7 point projection, it's not a surprise that he makes this list. Kittle is somebody who's going to play every snap for this team. They need him in there for the rushing downs. He's one of the best blockers, period, in the NFL, regardless of position. He utilizes his leverage better than I'd say anyone else in the NFL. He's probably the best pound-for-pound blocker in the NFL. I don't think anybody's even close. He's also one of the better yards after catch players in the NFL, regardless of position. There's a lot of running backs that average less yak than George Kittle, and they are in a far much better position to put up yak than tight ends. I mean, tight ends are usually getting hit right after they catch the ball. Running backs typically have 4 or 5 yards with the ball before they even get touched. And George Kittle is pretty much outperforming all of them when it comes to yak. That's how good this guy is. So George Kittle, somebody that I'm always bullish on for all of those reasons. Also bullish on him because we know he's going to be out there for pretty much every single snap. And a lot of the other players on this list are going to be put in and taken out of the game for certain sub packages. So really like him there at number 1, especially without people like Travis Kelce on the slate to worry about. That is all I've got for the Week 12 core picks. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you have as your favorite team to stack. Obviously, for me, it's probably Tom Brady. We're going to have to check on the ownership come Sunday, but they're in a very good game script, very good game environment, have tons of stacking options, and quite frankly, they're not priced too high for my liking. So go ahead and let me know who you've got. Maybe it's the Bucks, maybe it's someone else. Always love to hear from you guys down there. Throughout the week, we're going to have even more main slate content. Tomorrow, we're going to have our value picks coming out. Those will be our top 6 picks to save some salary. Out on Friday, we'll have our fades and sleepers. And of course, on Sunday morning, as per usual, we're going to have our weekly DFS live stream. That'll be at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, discussing any injuries, our player pool. We'll go through our complete Patreon projections during that live stream. We'll go over any questions that you have down in the chat. And overall, just get you guys prepared for those games and those lineups. So until then, good luck with any lineups that you guys are using for Thanksgiving. I also have a preview out for that, so I'll put a link down in the description if you guys haven't seen that yet. 3 games going on Turkey Day. By far the best day to watch football in the year. Just sit back, eat some food, drink some beer, enjoy the games. But until then, good luck, guys. Happy Thanksgiving, and have a good one.